let's continue on with the next few questions. We do have a couple exponents here, and so I will take this number 2 here, and I'm going to, well, first let's write down the 3 and the n both have an exponent of 1. So when we bring this 2 and this exponent, we got to bring them to all 3 of these, which leaves me with 3. 1 times 2 is 2. M 5 times 2 is 10. And n 1 times 2 is 2. So I have that. And then I'm multiplying here. So this is multiplying. So I have to put another set of brackets. I have a 3. And let's just write, okay, I've got a 2 to the 1 right there. So we're going to deal with the negative here. I've got 3 negatives, and a negative and a negative and a negative. I have an odd number of negatives, which makes my answer negative. Then I've got a 2 and a 1 times a 3. I'm going to bring this exponent now into all of these exponents, which is going to be 1 times 3 is 3. 7 times 3 is 21. And negative 5 times 3 is negative 15. And then before I actually do any multiplying, I do have these that I can't do anything with. I can't join them together in any way because they're not the same base. The m's I can do something with, and the n's I can also do something with because they're the same base. But the 3 and the 2 I can't. So first I'm going to go 3 squared is 9. And I still have an m to the 10 and an n squared times, I've got this negative symbol still, and I've got 2 cubed. So 2 to the power of 3, which is 8, m to the 21, n to the negative 15. And notice that I didn't put the 3 with that. If I wanted to, I would have told the person in the question, I would have put brackets around this, and I didn't. So this negative is just on the outside. Now I can multiply these. Now I do know that 9 times 8 is 72, and it's a negative 8, so I'll go negative 72. And then for the m's, I've got a 10 plus a 21. When you multiply, you add. And for the n's, I've got a 2 plus a negative 15. So I'm at negative 72, m to the 31, and n to the negative 13, which I don't like. That negative exponent, so I'll just bring the n to the 13 down below. Try to write that a little nicer. So n to the power of 13 will be down below. And that's our final answer. So to kind of recap that, I had to bring this 2 into all of the exponents, but I had to just make sure that I wrote the and it's not clear, but there is an exponent there. I had to write that. Same with the n as well. There is an exponent there. So I wrote those ones down. I brought the 3 in. I had to pay close attention to the fact that there was a this negative symbol here out in front. But after that, it all was relatively normal. So let's take a look at the next question. This 2, let's keep in mind here that there's this 2 exponent that's going to go into everything, including there's a 6 to the 1 and a 4 to the 1. Now, usually best practice is to reduce things at the beginning, like this 6 and 4. If I wanted to deal with some smaller numbers, I can reduce those as right away. I can actually reduce the x's and y's, but I'm not going to do that. I'll just do the 3 and the 2. So the 3 and the 2 is the same thing as 6 over 4. So both of those can be divided by 2. And then I've got an x squared, y 3, y 5, x negative 4. I don't know why it jumps around like this. That's really annoying. So I can now bring this exponent in. So I'm going to write down, this is actually a 3 to the 1 and a 2 to the 1, just so I don't forget. And then this exponent will go into all of those and all of those. So I've got a 3, 1 times 2 is 2. And then I got an x, 2 times 2 is 4, 3 times 2 is 6. And then on the bottom, a 2, and then 1 times 2 is 2, 5 times 2 is 10, and negative 4 times 2 is negative 8. Now I can't, like the x's I can put together, the y's I can put together, but the 3 and the 2 I can't. So I'm just going to evaluate them. So 3 squared is 9, and 2 squared is 4. So that's done. But now I can do the x's and the y's, but maybe I'll just write down so we know. I'll just do one step at a time so I don't move ahead of myself. Y10 x to the negative 8. So my step there was just finding out the 9 and the 4. And then I can, when I'm dividing, I have to subtract. So I've got x to the 4 minus what's on the bottom here, which is a minus 8. And then I also have a y to the 6 minus 10. And notice I did write those on top, because once you subtract, they always get written up top, and then we can move things to the bottom if they're negative. So there's my 9, there's my 4, and this can be added. 4 plus 8, so that's going to be an x to the 12. And then y, 6 minus 10 is going to be a negative 4. And then, like I said, any negative exponents can go to the bottom. So we'll have an x to the 12 and a y to the 4. And that is my final answer. So let's take a look at the last question. I'll just zoom out here in case you need to write anything down. But the last question, almost identical, but there's now a negative exponent on the outside, which doesn't really change too much. But let's first write down our exponents that we might have not written down here. 2, 3, 5, 4, and there's a 4 to the 1 and a 5 to the 1. Now we can compare the previous question here. 6 and a 4 could be reduced, so we did. I did 3 over 2. But 4 over 5 here can't be reduced, so I'm going to leave it, and I'm just going to bring this negative exponent on the outside here. I'm just going to bring it to everything. Actually, now that I think about it, that is sometimes something that we do sometimes, but let's try something different. There's multiple ways to do this. So what I'm actually going to do, and there's this rule, and it's kind of like it's a little bit of a trick, but we can take the whole fraction and we can flip it. So I'm going to write a 5 to the 1, a p to the 5, and a q to the 4. I'm going to write that on the numerator. And then on the denominator, I'm going to write a 4 to the 1, a p to the 2, q to the 3. So I literally just copied it. And if you do that, if you copy the bottom and paste it on top, copy the top, paste it on bottom, then you can actually flip the symbol and you can make it a positive 2. So it just will make things a lot easier. So I will multiply this in. Now I can multiply this 2 in to everything. Let's see what I got here. Now I've got a 5. 1 times 2 is 2. Q to the 10. No, sorry, that's a p to the 10. Q to the 8 over 4 to the 2. P to the 4. And Q to the 3 times 2 is 6. Now I do know what 5 squared is. That's 25. And 4 squared is 16. And now I can do some subtraction. So for my p's, I've got a 10. Subtract what's on the bottom, which is a 4. And for my q, I've got an 8. Subtract what's on the bottom, which is a 6. So I've got 25, and 16, and 10 minus 4 is going to be 6. 8 minus 6 is 2. And that is our final answer. So just to recap, when there's a negative exponent on the outside, what I was originally going to do is I was going to take that negative exponent and just chuck it into everything. But then everything has tons of negative exponents and you're subtracting and you have to subtract negatives and it just gets to be a bit of a mess. So one of the tricks that I did is just to flip everything. The whole fraction, flip it, and then I can make that a positive 2. So that's what I did. and that will be a little bit different. I won't do that for HIJK for the next one, letter K. Moving on to letter K here, one of the things that I notice is that there's a negative exponent at the very end. So it's exponents to the power of an exponent. It's a power rule. And I also notice that there's no numbers out in front, no coefficients out in front. Now, when I have coefficients out in front, for instance, in the previous one here, I had the coefficients and I had a negative. I like to just flip the entire fraction. That way I don't have to worry about numbers to the negative exponent. That can sometimes look a little funny. So I notice that I don't have any numbers out in front here, any coefficients, and I could take this whole fraction and flip it, but I just noticed that, well, there's no numbers in front, so it won't look kind of weird. And I also noticed that there's already a bunch of negatives in here. So multiplying a negative times a negative will get me a positive. And of course, multiplying negatives times positives will still be negative, but it's like flipping it won't get rid of all the negatives or anything because I still have negatives in this equation. So I'm going to take this one and I'm going to multiply the negative 3 in to everything. I'm not going to flip it this time. And again, the main reason is because I don't see these numbers out in front. So I actually just like throwing this in. But there are other ways to do this. You could reduce this right away. That's one way to do it, which I'm not going to do. But you could do that. So I've got negative 12 times negative 3 is a positive 36. And on the bottom, I've got a negative 30. And I've got some y's here. 13 times negative 3 is a negative 39. And negative 15 times 3 is going to be a positive 45. And lastly here, 3 times negative 3 is negative 9. And then I've got my 14s, which is times 3, which would be negative 42. And there's no exponent anymore, so I don't need any brackets around anything. Now I can subtract. So I've got the 36 subtract the bottom, which is a negative 30. I've got the y, I've got a negative 39 subtract the bottom, which is 45. And I've got the z, I've got the negative 9 subtract the bottom, which is negative 42. So I am subtracting a negative at the beginning here. That's just going to be a positive, which is nice. And right here at the end as well, subtracting a negative will be the same as addition. So really, this is going to be 36 plus 30, which is going to be 66. My y, negative 39 and negative 45. They're both negative numbers, so you can add them together. 39 and 45, we can add those together and just make sure our answer is negative because they're both negative. 9 plus 5, 14, which is going to be 8. So negative 84. Again, because they're both negative answers, so we'll combine them and make sure our answer is negative. And then we've got the z here. We've got a negative 9 plus 42. So we have 42 that are good and 9 that's negative. So our answer will be positive. There's way more positives. 42 minus 9 is going to be 33. And then we can move any negative exponents that we might have. I'll fix this 33 here. It's only the y there, so I'll put x to the 66, z to the 33, and y to the 84 will be now on the bottom, and it'll be a positive 84. Now, again, why did I just bring the negative exponent in this question compared to the previous one? And really the biggest reason was that there was no coefficients, no numbers out in front. So I don't mind just throwing this negative in. But if you wanted to, you could take the whole thing and flip this fraction and then make this a positive 3 and do it just like the previous question. But I wanted to do both kind of two different ways. So the first one up here was where we had to flip this, and this one we just threw it in. So the answer key is online if you need to double check anything, and then we'll go from there.